Quite brilliant report on Depo-Provera. It's called Depo-Provera, Deadly Reproductive Violence Against Women. Can be found on the internet if you Google that. Depo-Provera, Deadly Reproductive Violence. You can get the report and do read it. It is extraordinary. Can you also, is there some way in which they can contact you?
Our website is Rebecca, R-E-B-E-C-C-A, Project, P-R-O-J-C-T, Justice.org. RebeccaProjectJustice.org. My cell phone number is 202-406-0911. 202-406-0911. And if you want me to come and speak at schools or workplaces, I'm available to come and speak. I can go around the country speaking about this. And anyone who has been harmed, you can join our class in this class action lawsuit, and you're definitely welcome to do that. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I talk a little bit in my paper about this, but one of the things that is so insidious about what the Gates Foundation and its enormous marketing and publicity apparatus does is that it tells you, that up is down and black is white and good is evil and everything you can name. And so, for instance, with their contraceptive programs, they are sold, for instance, in a Newsweek cover story celebrating Melinda Gates and her contraceptive program. It's sold as empowering women and giving them choice, when in fact what it's really doing is denying women the right to control their own bodies and their own reproduction. Very important to keep that in mind whenever you run into this foundation.
But not only, sometimes I don't want to use the word denying, but just giving them access to safe contraceptives. I mean, we have, hundreds of safe contraceptives. I mean, this is not either or. It's not either Depo-Provera or nothing. We have safer, cheaper contraceptives, except that doctors who inject the Depo-Provera get a higher, payment from the government, for Medicaid, because they want you to use the most effective one. I mean, the most effective one, but it causes all these side effects. And the effective contraceptives that are being used in Europe and by several white women here in the United States are not given to poor women because it just doesn't pay us. It's not as good to use, in different health centers. They don't get a really high payment back in the government. And it's the same with Africa. Right. Yeah, USAID pays something lower for if you use, let's say, low estrogen. Yeah, which is much cheaper.
Now, similarly, when you look at the Gates Foundation publicity, as the foundation moves increasingly into food and agriculture, you see marketing and branding intended to suggest that the Gates Foundation is involved in finding new and exciting ways to feed the starving millions. But in fact, just as with the rest of their publicity, you find that the real story is something very different. Now, Brenda Biddle is an engaged anthropologist with a history of working with food as a chef, community gardener, food co-op worker, and harvester of agricultural crops. She currently teaches the anthropology of food at Hunter College and works as a researcher in an NYC nonprofit. Her work is about the emergence of food sovereignty as discourse and practice among members of the European Via Campesina. She has also done research on food sovereignty at several sites in Venezuela, including the Instituto Latinoamericano de Agroecologia, I'm not pronouncing it right, Paula Freire, IALA, and she's been affiliated with AgriWatch, which is an organization that keeps tabs on Agra, which is a collaboration between the Gates Foundation and basically big agribusiness like Monsanto since 2009. So Brenda Biddle is going to have some remarks now. Thanks, Brenda.
Well, first of all, I would just like to ask Kwame when he's going to start prosecuting Monsanto. Because this is a similar story that goes into the field of agriculture and the imbrication of very powerful interests, including the Bill Gates Foundation, the U.S. government, U.S. foreign policy, even I would say even President Obama is implicated in the unfolding of this story. So I had to put this talk together very, very quickly at the last minute, so bear with me. I wanted to just start out with this visual aid, which someone at AgriWatch did a few years ago, that shows the way in which the funding moves between the Gates Foundation, Monsanto, and then various projects in AGRA. Now, AGRA stands for Alliance for a New Green Revolution. And many of you probably know that the first Green Revolution, which was conducted in various parts of the Third World, but primarily in India, has been a terrible failure in many senses. Yes, there was some productivity gain in agriculture when farmers started to use chemical-based fertilizers and more modern technology brought to them by the Green Revolution, but that comes at a great cost to the quality of the land, the quality of the water, and the quality of the health of the planet and the health of human beings. So the idea that a new green revolution could be brought to Africa this is not an idea that Africa welcomes. This is the brainchild of someone who is a technocrat and a capitalist. He understands technology and he understands capitalism. He does not understand the kind of structural violence that ensues from these kinds of efforts. He does not understand hunger. He thinks that technology will solve the problem of world hunger. As has been widely documented, we have adequate food now to we could feed up to 12 billion people with the food that's now produced on the planet. The problem of hunger is a problem of distribution of food. It's a problem of access. It's a problem of entitlement. It's not a problem of production. Yes, production is very important to consider, but what we should be considering for the future is climate-smart agriculture, not technology-smart agriculture. I could go on and on about the ills of industrial agriculture, but I don't think that's really the point now. Hopefully that's something that you all know about at this point. What I'd like to talk more about is the way in which, under the cover of these large collectives like AGRA, and then which was formed in 2006, and then another group which was formed by the G8 countries in 2012, which is called the New Alliance for Food and Nutrition Security. Now, in this second alliance, it's kind of a reformatting where Monsanto is actually not mentioned. GMOs are not mentioned, but the CEO of Monsanto was in on the process of forming this group. In this alliance, countries are forced to change their legislation to be in accord with what the alliance promotes, which is going to be more industrial agriculture, more penetration of transnational corporations into third world countries, and more displacement of peasant farmers around the world. In Africa, about 70% of the population is fed by small-scale agriculturalists. Many of them are women. If Gates's vision and the vision of AgriWatch and the vision of this new Alliance for Food and Nutrition Security, if their visions are accomplished in Africa, these people will be displaced from their land. Where will they go? They'll go to the burgeoning slums around the world, well, certainly the ones in Africa, maybe somewhere else, but they won't have jobs. As Samir Amin has written, and this is mentioned in Jake's paper in the section called Land Mobility, a vision for the future of agriculture will reduce the number of people that are able to work in agriculture to a very tiny fraction. And there are no jobs in these burgeoning slums for the people that are going to be displaced. So essentially it's going to cause more hunger. These policies are going to cause more hunger. Obama took a recent trip to Africa, and one of the countries that he stopped in was Tanzania. Well, Tanzania is seen as the soft spot for the northern expansion of Monsanto into Africa. So Monsanto already has about 10 offices in southern Africa. So it's established there, but there's a growing amount of activism and information about genetically modified products throughout Africa, and both consumers and governments are starting to really feel the concerns for the health of the environment and the health of human beings. So some people have speculated that Obama's trip was in part to pave the way for GMOs into Tanzania, where the recent president started to speak favorably of them in the last few years. Now, interestingly, the international peasant movement, which I've done research with, which is called the Via Campesina, which means the peasant way, they have recently moved their office to Tanzania. And they have, starting in 1996, introduced a totally different vision for the future of agriculture and the future of feeding people on the planet, and that's called food sovereignty. Via Campesina has a very extensive website which you can look at. You can see video clips of activists and farmers and peasants from around the world, and you can hear in their own voices what they think about Monsanto, what they think about genetically engineered foods, and what they think about things like the Alliance for a Green Revolution. So I would recommend to you that rather than listening to me, which you're forced to do right now, but that you go to the website and try to see what some of the people within Africa are saying.
And what is the website?
Just all you need to do is Google the Via Campesina. So that's VIACAPENSIA. I can read it. Campesina. Did I miss that? Yeah, Campesina. Let me find. I'll put the website up here so that you can see that.
Fertilizers.
So you can see the website's in several different languages, and you can get extensive documentation about food sovereignty and other efforts to create a world in which everyone has the right to food, in which everyone has access to food. There are numerous aspects to what would constitute food sovereignty. One of those is land reform. So essentially, food sovereignty is really talking back to global policies of neoliberalism in which food is commodified and farmers are increasingly encouraged to produce commodities for the world market rather than food for human beings. Food sovereignty essentially means that people